Social media land. This is Ted Victor, founder of the Broward Social Network. Today is Tuesday, June the 2nd at approximately 5 p.m. We are once again back to have a conversation about a Black man's response to Minneapolis. And I'm making it clear to everyone that this is about Black men, but obviously not only for Black men. This is a conversation that all Americans must partake in. As a person of color, as a child of Africa living in the United States, the unfortunate circumstances of police brutality are happening way too often, and therefore I have called in some help from the community in order to be able to have a therapeutic conversation as to what's going on. I'm going to go in no particular order. I'm going to give my wonderful distinguished panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves, and then we're going to have a general conversation. If you are able to see this on social media, on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, you are welcome to weigh in and ask some questions. And on Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to have the female counterpart to this conversation, because once again, this is an endeavor that we all Americans, white, Black, Hispanic, and others must absolutely participate in, because I do not believe I should be the only one who is concerned about my safety. Okay, Dwight Bullard, please introduce yourself to social media land and welcome to the Broward Social Network.
Thank you so much, Ted, for...
Dwight?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Thank you so much, Ted, for the invitation. My name is Dwight Bullard. I'm the political director for the New Florida Majority. I'm also excited that I hold the role as the president for the South Dade NAACP, the South Dade branch of the NAACP as well here in Miami-Dade County. Look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
You're muted, Ted.
You're on mute, Ted.
I muted myself. Sorry about that. All right, Eric Gooden, please go ahead and introduce yourself to social media land.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much, Ted, for bringing us all together for this powerful conversation. My name is Eric Gooden. I'm actually the founder and executive director for 35U, which is a nonprofit that engages and motivates the next generation of leaders in entrepreneurship, education, media, and healthcare. And I'm actually looking forward to having this discussion because this is needed right now.
Thank you very, very much. Next, we're going to go ahead. Mr. Badeau, please introduce yourself to social media land.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ted, for the invitation. My name is Horace Badeau. I am an educator. I've been an educator for the last 17 years. I'm also the founder of Use Your Speak. It is a speaker coaching company to help people to develop their voice and to use their voice and to find their power in their voice. I am looking forward to this conversation because I do have a lot on my mind as well, and I need a forum to get it all out. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. I broke my own rule. I usually tell people to put their phone on silence, but this is a time whereby the phone has been been ringing off the hook, as you can tell. So let's go ahead and go to Mr. Woodard, and then after that, we'll have Commissioner Douglas out of Sunrise. Mr. Woodard, please introduce yourself to social media land. Unmute your microphone, please. Go ahead, hold on. Unmute it.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Woodard.
Hi, everyone. I'm Robert Woodard. I work for a healthcare company as an analyst, and I am born and raised of Miami, Florida. So, as you know, Facebook, I do little mini posts, maybe usually Hot Topic Tuesdays, things of that nature, where we try to discuss things. And I am looking very much forward to this uncomfortable yet necessary conversation today.
Uncomfortable is correct. Uncomfortable is correct. And considering that hundreds and thousands of people will see this video, I'm telling you honestly, I'm really doing my best to maintain my composure. All right, so thank you very much, Mr. Woodard, and welcome. And last, definitely but not least, Commissioner Mark Douglas, wonderful leader out of the city of Sunrise. Sir, what say you about who you are and what you do?
Hi, Ted. Thanks for asking me to join this conversation. As you indicate, I am a city commissioner in the city of Sunrise, the only Black commissioner on that body at this time. And I am also an attorney at law here in South Florida. I happen to practice criminal defense and a number of different areas that intersects with the lives of our Black community. And so, you know, when you invited me to join the conversation, I felt it was important for me to lend my voice to this discussion that's taking place nationally and locally. And so thank you for joining me. I look forward to joining the rest of your team here, a wonderful set of young men to discuss the pertinent issues that are, you know, going on here in our county and nationally.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Douglas. Okay, so now the first question is going to go to Dwight Bullard. And as a fellow educator, one of many in the room, and these videos, I also share them with my high school students because I'm not sure anybody is, but for sometimes some people are not necessarily aware as to what's going on. If you can, in a very quick 1 or 2 minutes, give us a picture of the current events and how is it that we got here, Dwight Bullard? I'm saying this to you. I'm not trying to get emotional about it, but I just want to know, how is it that we got here? So talk to us about current events. Talk to us about how we are all George Floyd, and talk to us about how is it that we got here, man? How is it that we got here?
Wow, trying to make a summation of that in 2 minutes. I'll try my best, but it's 400 years, 401 years, 1619. You have 19 indentured Africans come to the coast of the United States. Within a matter of 30 years, you start to see your first laws passed that mark the difference between indentured African servitude, i.e. chattel slavery, and would have been European servitude. From that point on, you have an inequitable system that gets created. You stack on top of that an inequitable justice system, inequitable laws, creation of a country, all these things. And so at no point was there ever a remedy for the inequity that had been compounded over that time period. So yes, we are all George Floyd, but what listeners need to understand is that we're also all Sean Bell and Amadou Diallo and Rodney King, Renisha McBride. We are all Sandra Bland. We are all Trayvon Martin. These are all interconnected events that have taken place in a very, very problematic history on race in this country that has resulted many times, too often times, in Black violence. We are all Crispus addicts. You know, the first person killed in the so-called creation of this country, but is you know, rarely ever recognized, is not viewed in the same light, the same hero worship as the names Benjamin Franklin or George Washington, even though he gave as much, if not more, than any of those men, right? And so that gross inequity in how we are viewed as Black men, how we are treated as Black men, is something that has both been codified and multiplied over centuries of mistreatment, inequity, and racism in this country. And so I'm glad we're having this conversation, but I need people to understand that this is not a one-off. You know, George Floyd isn't some sort of isolated incident. You know, we've been arguing about this, we've been yelling, we've been screaming, we've been in the streets talking about this since 1619. 1619, you start seeing letters talking about the inequity of just those first 19. 1829, David Walker talks about this in his letter to the colored, or his appeal to the colored citizens of the world. You know, Sojourner Truth writes about this. Frederick Douglass writes about this. You know, all these, you know, Booker T. Washington, the list goes on and on and on and on, of Black men basically saying, stop treating us as if we are second-class citizens in a country that we literally built with our bare hands. So.
Thank you very much for that opening. Let's go over to Horace Badeau. And then after that, I'm going to go over to Gooden. I'm going to prep you in advance. The question for you, Gooden, is to talk about whether or not we have the right to be angry, because the United States has given us a lot of opportunities, right? But do we have the right to be angry? And is that the way to go? So that's for you, Brother Gooden. But for you, Brother Bado, I'd like for you to talk about what is the relationship between current events and the psyche of the Black man? Is that something that is a thing, or should we just kind of like, it's no big deal? Is this something that we should just kind of say, you know what, things happen, or is there some sort of pattern to somehow attack the Black man? I mean, in other words, is the Black man an endangered species?
Well, I am a big believer in the fact that our environment helps to shape who we are, right? How we respond to our environment and the stimuli that we get from our environment helps us to have a sense of who we are, have a sense of our value, have a sense of how we will appear in the world and how we would show up in our daily lives. And current events absolutely affect how we see ourselves, because our experiences have taught us what we've seen around us, what we've experienced personally, what our families have experienced, what our brothers have experienced, have taught us that our value has been non-existent. And we have been fooled into believing, with all the opportunities that we have been able to get. Yes, we were able to get education. Yes, some of us are able to move economically up the ladder. Yes, some of us are able to move out of our dire situations of being born in ghettos or in poverty, and some of us are able to move up the ladder. But that doesn't come without a fight. That doesn't come without fighting against a system that is in place to keep us where we are, or to even allow us to go backwards. So our psyche is very much affected, to the point where we internalize what we experience, and not only do we live that out and sometimes affect each other with these negative mindsets that we have, we grow up angry. We grow up not necessarily knowing how to find our place in the world, where we know we have a place and where we know we should have a place, but yet we're not offered that place. And if we do get to that place, we have to fight. And to see innocent people, I've been taught, and I know, Ted, you are from the Caribbean, right? If I'm not.
Yes, I am, very much so,
Yeah.
yes.
And whether you're from the Caribbean or not, you're taught that, okay, if you follow these set of rules,
yes,
you're gonna be okay. You get your education, you study, you stay out of trouble, keep your pants up, right? Stay away from certain groups, don't be in certain areas. At nighttime, don't be outside, be inside at night.
Follow the rules.
Follow the rules and you'll be okay.
Right.
And your life will be smooth. We've been all taught that. And as a teacher, I grapple with that because I'm teaching my kids that, but I kind of know that's not how it works.
Right.
I kind of struggle between, okay, how much truth do I give them? And how do I prepare them for a world that really doesn't work that way, at least not for us.
Right.
Having been taught all these things, and then looking at society and looking at what's happening and how that actually affirms the opposite, it messes with your psyche and it messes with who you are and your sense of self. And we play that out if we're not healthy enough in our minds, if we're not strong enough in our minds, if we don't have enough healthy outlets, those things get played out in such negative and self-sabotaging ways for Black men.
Yes, very much so. I have a couple things that I'd like to be able to respond to that, because I so can relate to what you're saying, but I'm going to give everybody the opportunity to get in there. So Gooden, talk to us about anger and where we're at. And then the next question is going to be for Brother Woodard. Brother Woodard, I'm going to ask you about the value of protesting, whether or not what we're doing, the energy that we're expending in the community, whether or not we're using our energy and our time properly in order to respond to what happened in Minneapolis. And then when we're going to go on to Commissioner Douglas, I want to talk about your role as an elected official. What is your role in this climate? Okay, so Asa Shaw is here. I don't see him yet. Asa, we don't see you, we don't hear you, but we're going to give you a minute to get adjusted, and then you're going to join the conversation. So Eric Gooden, talk to us. What city are you in again? And unmute your microphone. Eric, your microphone.
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead. What city are you in again, Eric?
So I live in Boca Raton, Florida right now, but I'm
Okay.
actually streaming live from Michigan right now.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you and welcome aboard. And let us know about the state of mind and anger. Are you angry?
Yeah, I mean, words can't describe, like how I'm feeling right now. I mean, just with this generation right now and seeing everybody out and just protesting, and, you have peaceful protesters, you have violent protesters, but I think they're all trying to accomplish a goal to speak out on the injustices that are going on in this country right now. And I feel like the reason why people are angry right now in the protests is because, our local leaders and state leaders are not addressing the injustices that are going on in this country. And I think it starts with policy. And I think there's not enough policy that is going on, that's going into effect right now that's addressing this. And I think, and also I feel like that our leaders need to speak and say that and address
all
it.
All of them, independent of
right.
ethnicity, independent of gender, all of them. It is all of our responsibility to protect the Black man. Maybe I'm biased, okay, but all of them, absolutely all of them.
Yeah, because I feel like, when you hear them make a speech or you hear them put out a statement, they're just attacking the protesters. They're not speaking about why people are protesting right now. And I think they're missing that. Right. And I think once they address that, the protests will end. But the real work is after that. And I feel like policy has to be implemented to tackle all of these issues that are going on in police departments right now.
Thank you very much. Asa Shaw, once again, I see you on the screen, but are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, so we're going to have you introduce yourself in a minute, okay? Let's go to Brother Woodard. Brother Woodard, there's a lot of people out in the streets, and the silver lining, and I always say there's a silver lining in every crisis. The silver lining is that the people protesting are not just you and I, right? Everybody's protesting. I saw a video whereby a white guy is telling another white guy, Black Lives Matter. And so I just want to know, in your viewpoint, is this a good use of our energy? Is this a good use of our time?
Yes to both of those things, because I think it's necessary. And I'm glad that you did bring up that it's other cultures, it's just not ours, this time. And to be honest with you, I haven't really seen that since maybe before my time with Martin Luther King. And the reason why I think the energy is necessary is because what other alternatives do we have at this moment? We don't get to really vote right now until November. And it's almost the perfect storm in the sense of people who have been basically social distancing for the last 2.5 months. And this is the first thing they get to do when they come out. So they're going to have energy. Whether it's being used all the way properly or not is definitely up for debate, but I think it is necessary. For those who say, why can't they protest more peacefully? I go back to Martin Luther King Jr. Those of you who may not remember, when he and others did protest, they were met with police dogs, hoses, beaten down. Colin Kaepernick, the highest office in the land, referred to NFL players that took a peaceful knee, sons of bees. They were saying, hey, don't do this while we're playing football. So to say protest peacefully, I'm always for protesting peacefully. But to remember to tell someone to protest somewhere where we can't see or hear them is not a real protest. Definitely not against, I'm not for the looting and anything like that. That takes away from the message. However, protests will always be necessary. I think it's a springboard to say, as we heard earlier from my other brothers, then what? But the protest is necessary, it's needed, and it's, to your point and to my point, it's a shame that 60 plus years later, here we are still having to protest and not for anything new. What I've realized is that this hits home for other nationalities more so is because this one to others seems more indefensible. To the Black man, they're almost always indefensible. But this one was almost like, okay, wait a minute. The process forward is a slow process, but this one takes us back. You're almost trading in the tree for the sidewalk. You're trading in the ropes for the cuffs. And so when we see that as other Black men, we're like, okay, there's one thing for us not to get major progress, but to go backwards is definitely not happening. And so I think that's why the protests that you're seeing across the world is necessary and needed.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Asa Shaw, you like everybody else in this room has been a person with your foot in the community, your foot on the ground. And before you came on, I just wanted to just let everybody know that this is a safe space, and I want everybody to be able to just kind of really express themselves as to how they feel. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and then give us some feedback as to where you're at psychologically, spiritually at this time, because as I opened up, I am George Floyd. We are George Floyd. You're on mute. Okay, go ahead.
Yep, Asa Roger Shaw. I currently work with the Movement for Black Lives in an organization called Black Men Build. And how I'm feeling currently, I think I feel a mix of pride and anger. The pride comes from the fact no matter what Black folks are doing out in the street and the folks that are allies with us out in the street, no matter what they're doing, they're standing up. And it's been 401 years since 1619 when we got here in America, and we've been fighting ever since. So anytime I see Black folks standing up and not taking the repression and the oppression that the state gives them, it gives me pride in my heart, because there's so many times where folks tell us to sit down, to lay down, to protest differently, to seek rights differently. I'm just happy and proud of my folks that they're out there standing up for what's right, no matter what they're doing. And then the anger just comes from 401 years. I mean, I've been working with Black Lives Matter Alliance, Broward, the Dream Defenders, and folks for almost 10 years on police violence. In 2012, Trayvon Martin, 2014, Mike Brown, 2015 and 16, Sandra Bland, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile. I can go on and on. And we've been at the same point again and again. So I'm at a place where we've been doing what we've been doing for a long time. So if folks want to do something a little different, I'm all down for it.
Thank you very much for the feedback. The list of names are endless. We have Amadou Diallo, we have Rodney King. It's just insane. And I have chosen to embody all of those names. I am all those people, because at any moment, at any time, being at the wrong place at the wrong time, I could definitely be these folks as well. Commissioner Douglas, sir, with all due respect, you have COVID-19, you have hurricane season coming up, you have economic downturn, and now you have George Floyd. Why would you even sign up to be a commissioner? I mean, what is this, man? What are we doing? How do you address these dire needs as a leader, as an elected official?
Well, first of all, I think those of us who have the capacity ought to offer ourselves in whatever areas we have capacity, because we can't fix it from the outside. That's number one. And so me as an attorney, this is my day-to-day profession. I was a prosecutor in Miami before I became a private criminal defense attorney. And so not only did I see it from that perspective, but I also have spent the last 12, 13 years doing criminal defense, everything from murder and drug trafficking and you name it. And so I've really had an opportunity to see the criminal justice system from inside out. As an elected official, that's a more recent 3.5 years I've been doing it. But, as a Black person in the community, I think it was incumbent on me to offer myself and the skills and experiences that I had to leadership, especially in a community as diverse as Sunrise. It is known that Sunrise is a majority of minorities that reside in that city. And that's borne out by this census data going back to 2010. But I'm the first non-white, I guess one politely would say the first minority who has ever been elected in that city. And that was a feat in itself, despite the fact that the demographics would have called for such to be at a point earlier. And I can tell you, in all the spheres that I work, I still see the lack of opportunities and the lack of equality and the lack of options available for members of our community. But I can tell you that I'm heartened by the fact that I'm inside and is able to do something about it from inside. And that is the most important thing. And one of the things, I want to say is, that I've encountered a lot of our community who does not believe in the voting process or does not take the opportunity to go and participate in the political process because they don't believe it will make a difference. Well, I'll tell you what, it does make a difference. It does make a difference because, to call a spade, I went to a city that had a police department of almost 200 people. And I can tell you, I won't quote a specific number, but I'll tell you that the amount of Black police officers in the force nowhere near reflected the diversity of the community. And I've been able to move that dial. I know we have more than doubled the amount of African Americans on that police force in the 3.5 years that I've been there. And I say more than double. I almost want to say triple, but I wouldn't be as certain about those numbers. And just minorities across the board, Hispanics, foreign-born Muslims, you name it. And it's important that those who are policed in our community reflects the diversity of our community. It's important that those who serve our community, period, in whatever roles, reflects that, because they can sit at the table when decisions are being made, and they can point to the nuances of various areas of the community and various segments of the community and make the policies and processes more reflective of the needs of the different groups of people. So I can tell you that from the inside, it's very, very important that more of us offer ourselves, number one, and that those of us who offer ourselves, that we get the support of the other members of the community, who don't just shrug it off and say, I'm not going to vote, I'm not going to this, I'm not going to that. But I don't believe we participate enough in the political process, and that is why we're not taking it.
Yes.
When you go out, you see, and this has gone on in many different communities, not just Sunrise, but politicians will focus on a certain area of the community because they know they'll get those votes, and they won't knock on your door. You always wonder, I've never seen this guy. Well, he doesn't knock on your door because he doesn't think you're going to vote. And if he doesn't think you're going to vote, he's not going to be inclined to take care of your needs.
Right.
So you have to be a participant in the process. Now, protesting is good to highlight certain things. But at the end of the day, we have to take action. Mm-hmm. The protest is, I'm trying to bring attention. But then there's concrete actions that we now have to take. Once we gain those allies, it can't be just lots of protests have gone on. And I hear the talk about, Mr. Bullard eloquently spoke to the history of this country and how people dating back to the 1600s have been writing about equality and citizenship. But you have to remember, when this country became independent in 1776, the laws that were not made to protect blacks.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, it was 92 years later before we had the 14th Amendment.
Right.
Which is, you know, barely at that point, the equal protection law and so on came about because of the Dred Scott case, where they say, you know, a person of African descent cannot be a citizen. But if you go in an independent country for 92 years not recognizing a particular group of people as citizens, and you're treating them not as citizens, the laws were not meant to protect you.
Right. Right.
And so 92 years, you're talking about 2 to 3 generational groups growing up, learning that you're nothing more than chattel. They can hunt you down if you escape. They can treat you in any way. The Dred Scott case was, I believe, the gentleman, abuse was meted out to his spouse, and he sued. And he couldn't get protection from the courts on the diversity jurisdiction. And so if you grew up and your father is telling you that that thing over there, because we were not human, that thing is not equal, not subject to the same rights, and then you have children, and then you have grandkids, and this is perpetuated throughout generations, and it is perpetuated to this day, because even then, in 1856, when in the 1850s, when 1868, when the 14th Amendment was passed, we were still going into the 1950s before we had Brown Bay's Board of Education and so on. And this is considered pretty modern in terms of history. So there's a lot in the law where it was never created to protect a particular group of people. And it's been perpetuated by many individuals through the years that this is the case.
Okay, so you've given us quite a bit to ponder upon. So let's go back to, thank you very much for that very walk down history lane. Dwight, I know this is a loaded question. How do we fix this, brother? How do we fix this? Because I respect Commissioner Douglas's response, but I'm not happy about it, because what he's saying, it's in the DNA of this country to not recognize my value. And I'm not happy about that, to put it nicely. How do we fix this? How do we fix this? And then the next question is going to be for my brother Bedell. What do we tell our students? Like, how do we tell our students? Because we're supposed to be an authority, and Dwight, you're an educator too, right? You know, I teach the periodic table, I teach chemistry and biology, but I always find a way to weave in social events and current events. And I tell them that the textbook with all the white men is not telling them the whole story. I tell them that. But how do we fix this? Because this is an unsustainable model. This is not working for me. I have children, I have students. I just cannot have their cortisol level raised when they're just walking down the street. When my kids are seeing cops, I just do not want that. How do we fix this, brother? How do we fix this?
So it's a, you know, what Commissioner Douglas pointed out is just fact. I mean, someone posed the question to me: do I think racism is a mental illness or disorder, or is it more of just a societal problem that can just like go away? And I was like, it's both. But you have to think about it like addiction, right? So the country's been addicted to racism since its inception. You know, and so that addictive gene can get passed down from generation to generation. But how do you break the cycle of addiction, right? And I say that to say we already have the answer. A, you have to have a committed and willing desire to want to get rid of that addiction. B, it takes therapy, like no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I think, you know, us being Black men on this particular call, too often in our community, mental health and therapy and the seeking out of therapy is oftentimes viewed as taboo or something that we don't do. You know, we try to replace religion with therapy, and the reality is that we have, we have psychological stressors and things that we have to deal with as Black people that we have to condition ourselves out of in order to move forward. Equally so, our white counterparts, our non-Black counterparts, have to recognize the tendency they have to rely on privilege and supremacy and their addiction to racism, and so they have to break that, right? And then the last thing is and this is what Commissioner Douglas talks on around the application of the law and politics and where that plays a role. It's absolutely essential, right? And this kind of goes back to the mental health question with Black folks. We're oftentimes relying on people who do not look like us to offer up an answer on how we solve a problem about us. And that's how we got into the problem in the first place, right? Like someone came along and decided we needed a workforce of people and applied it towards us. So the idea that you're expecting someone who conditionally does not know how to break their addiction to racism to somehow pop up one day and be like, you know how we're going to solve racism? Without you being an active participant in that determination, not only is a bad thing, but it means you're conceding your power to another individual. So when we talk about the notion of voting, critical, but you also have to be willing and able to break down the wall that is white supremacy, privilege, and racism, whether it's in custom law or ever. And I just had a conversation with my sister, she works in an all-white space and was just like, she asked me, do I have to be the person who hypes up all the time when I see the absence of Black people or the absence of a Black presence in the workspace? And the answer is yes. Yes, until the other folks understand the inherent flaw in their thinking. You're talking about people who've been conditioned to not see you, right? So therefore they want to act as though they're colorblind and then create a 98% white environment and then somehow claim that it's diverse because 50% of them are women and 50% of them are men, but only 2 people at the workspace are Black, right? And so we have, it's all of that, right? So to Ted, your point in closing, when you're talking about how do you address it with children in the classroom, it's just that, I had a 0 tolerance policy in my class for the, creating the condition of privilege and superiority. My whole thing was at the end of the day, and call it what you want, this is the dictatorship. You're all in this and you're going to ultimately want grades. And how you get grades isn't going to be determined on how much money you got, how much access to wealth, who you are, or what your diversity is. It's going to be on how well you do the work, right?
On merit.
Yeah, and so creating that condition in literally every facet of society is absolutely important. And that's why pushing, the Joe Bidens of the world, protesting against the Donald Trumps is so important. The last point, and I'm sorry, and I'll shut up, is I do have to disagree with the commissioner on the notion of protest and voting being kind of mutually exclusive. Voting is a form of protest. Civic action and civic engagement is a form of protest. Boycotting is a form of protest. How you spend and use your money is a form of protest. All of them are forms of protest, whether it's individualized or groupthink around what a protest is. I do not like the debate that always pops up in these moments around how someone should protest. Everybody has a right to go at this thing the way they deem necessary, the way they deem efficient. But at the end of the day, the question you have to ask yourself is, will what I'm doing gain the result or deliver the result that I intend to get from it? And that's all we ask that people think about in terms of the action steps that they take. So if somebody thinks lighting a police car on fire is going to get them what they need to get, that's their business. We can, you can disagree with it, but I'm not going to, in this moment, kind of take it away, because at the end of the day, we need to both Martin and Malcolm. We needed W.B. Du Bois and Booker T.
Very well
We needed
stated.
Garvey, and we needed all that. So
Very well stated. And I agree that how you protest is a personal choice, because I respect the intent of Martin's philosophy and Malcolm X's philosophy, and I should say, while they were opposing views with the same idea, the same end goal in mind. However, I just want everybody to remember that the peaceful protest did not liberate, did not free Africans, did not free our ancestors. It was a rebellion. It was the Maroons. It was firing. It was fighting back. It was getting crazy, like people are getting right now. And I saw Whoopi Goldberg get on social media. She says, well, what about the family that spent all their money to open up the nail shop, and now you're going to go ahead and loot them, and they were not part of the problem? I understand that. I totally understand that. And I do not want the mom and pop shops to be broken down and burnt down and so forth. I do not want that. I don't want anybody to get hurt and so forth. However, somebody reminded us that the Aubrey case happened several days in advance, and it is until folks started getting angry and crazy that the media started paying attention. And I was taught at an early age, you can ask for respect, but many times you have to actually grab it and snatch it. You have to grab it and snatch it. So once again, considering that this is going to be seen by my students, this is going to be seen by hundreds of people, if not thousands, I'm not asking for people to go out and light stuff up. However, how else are we going to get your attention? You tell me, because we did the peaceful protest thing. We did. If you were listening when Martin was talking, we wouldn't be here now. You understand that? So let's go ahead and go to Asa. Asa, your activism is well connected with representation and elected officials. Now more than ever, we have a situation whereby we are screaming. We are crying in need of people to show us the way. Talk to us about the vote. Talk to us about the connection between politics and where we're at right now. You have to unmute your mic.
Yeah, I mean, I see there's a very clear angle for this right now, specifically around politics, electoral politics. I think that all of these things are tools in the shed of a revolutionary or a organizer or whatever you want to call yourself. Politics and electoral justice is that thing. Protest is another piece of it. Building alternative institutions in your community is another piece of it. But so I say that to say that, like Dwight said, these things aren't mutually exclusive. They can work together to win us our goal, right? So we know that we have some folks in elected positions that we can talk to that can help us put forth legislation that we can help them fight for, right? And they can be on assignment in the legislature, and we don't have to try to get them to be at every protest with us because that's not their assignment. So we have to understand that our strategy needs to be dual faceted. And right now we have elections in August in Broward County, right? Which is 2 months away.
Mm-hmm.
All this energy that we have right now, there's a state's attorney's race and there's a sheriff's race coming up, right? There's a public defender's race coming up. All this energy that we have could be pushed into making sure the candidates of state's attorney's race and the sheriff are putting forth and either on writing on paper that they agree with the demands that we want, or publicly saying that they will do the demands that we ask for, right? And we can put pressure on them to make sure those things happen. Like folks said before, there is these things, you just said it, that these things usually never happen without pressure. A lot of people think that Walmart or these other organizations increase their wages or give benefits to workers just because it makes sense. No, it's because workers have stood up and fought for it, right? In 2012, George Zimmerman was not arrested until a whole bunch of young people walked to Sanford and blocked the police doors, and then they arrested him, right? So it wasn't like the police just decided to arrest this man. So protest is not just something that's a what's next. Protest can get you results, period. Right? So it's a tool that should be used in the shed as a way to have strategic, nonviolent, direct action to put pressure on folks to win the demands that we need necessary, right? It's another tool in the shed, and it could also be used to build awareness and bring people into the movement. But as far as electoral politics, I think that we have a really good chance to do like an organizing blitz for the next 2 months to move folks into understanding what the state's attorneys and sheriffs race means, and move this energy into there and into other things.
Thank you very, very, very much. Brother Badeau, I have a couple questions for you, and I do not mean to put you on the spot, my fellow brother, my fellow educator. I want to know, how are you? Are you walking with an elevated level of anxiety? Are you walking in fear? And in addition to that, I'm going to ask you to see if you can translate what Brother Shaw said about the activism that's necessary. How do we do this in the classroom? How do we give this, how do I make our young people care? Because you do know that our students in the classroom, I don't remember what level that you're at, if you're at the high school or the middle school level, a lot of them are politically apathetic. So how do we share with them the sense of urgency while I am trying to my very best keep my emotions under wrap for the sake of looking like a man in front of y'all, right? Not looking too weak, because I am walking around with a heightened level of anxiety. I'm going to Publix and I'm looking around to making sure that nothing's about to pop off.
So first of all, let's just acknowledge the fact that there's nothing unmanly about crying or about being vulnerable. In fact, that's part of the highest expression of strength.
Good job. Good job. Thank you very much.
To be able to express your feelings in a public space, knowing that you may be judged. So let's just dispel that notion right now that there's anything
Thank you.
about, and that's what we have had to do for so long, right? In spite of all the things that we go through, in spite of the injustices, in spite of the being pulled over by a cop for nothing, or watching someone die in front of us, or even on our TV, or watching our sons and our daughters experience the trauma that the police have inflicted on them, we have to always go into work with a straight face. Everything is okay. We got work to do, but we do need a space to mourn. We do need a space to grieve, but we do need a space to express ourselves. So it is okay. And I think we all need to acknowledge that, especially right now, we do need to let it out. Because if we don't let it out in healthy ways, it's going to come out in unhealthy ways.
That's right. That's right.
Deliberate in how we let out our emotions. So I honor you, Ted, for being vulnerable. I honor you.
Thank you.
Secondly, with regard to how I'm feeling, I am nervous as hell. I'm anxious for the same reasons that I described earlier when I was speaking, that I could do everything right and still suffer at the hands of a cop who's having a bad day, or suffer at the hands of someone who thought I fit a description that looked like someone that could have done something. And because they're more prone to be biased against me, any sudden movement, I can get shot and killed right there. And everything that I've worked for, all the goals that I've had for my life is ended in a moment. That messes with your head. Yes. And I don't care how many of us are walking around as strong and as invincible as we want to be as Black men. Yeah, we're strong, we're this, we're that. This tears us up inside. It tears me up inside, thinking about my students, thinking about my brothers, thinking about my sister, thinking about my uncle, my aunt. Just because of this, something I was born with that I did not choose. I'm glad this was chosen for me. I'm definitely glad. I would not take this away for the world, but it also comes with its burdens, right? So there is a level of angst, and there's a book, and I just happen to have it right next to me, by Dr. Joy DeGroy that I want to recommend to everyone.
Post-traumatic slave syndrome, post-traumatic slave syndrome. Very good. Very good.
Syndrome. Really good read about just the history of the legacy of how slavery has given us generational anxiety, generational trauma, and how we deal with that on a daily basis. So yeah, I'm totally in angst, and I hold in one hand the need to hope, because that's all I could do.
Mm-hmm.
I have to hope because that's all I have left at this point. Because if I don't hope, then I'm scared of what could happen if I'm not hoping.
That's right.
Scared of what I may think and what that would now germinate in my mind, I suppose, with regard to just how I decide to live out my life, right?
Right.
And know with how this translates into the classroom, man, it's difficult to hold it together. In fact, I'm almost glad right now that school is out, because then having to look into the faces of my Black young men and Black young women while this is happening, while they're struggling to make sense of this. They're 17, 16, 15 years old.
Impressionable.
For no reason.
Right.
For doing nothing. They experience the bias in the classroom that teachers have towards or against, depending on what you're talking about, Black folk. There's studies that chronicle the biases that exist in the classroom. So they are still living some version of that. And to provide a safe space for them to grow becomes that much more important to me now as a Black educator. Not only for all kids, but especially for my Black kids. Because now more than ever, they need us to instill value in them, to make them believe in themselves, for them to be able to see what's going around or see what's going on around them and still believe that I am somebody, that I can still make it, that I still have purpose, that I still have value in spite of what they think about me. I have to now define what I think about myself. As a child. And as a teacher, I need to constantly reiterate that, right? I need to teach them how to use their voice, how to look into the face of injustice and say, no, this is wrong and I'm gonna do something about it. I have to give them a support system for them to grieve, for them to deal with the adversities and deal with the maladies that they see around them, right? All of this becomes a work that is more important now than ever as a Black educator.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're preaching to the choir and I can relate to you. And I thank you for your welcoming my vulnerability. I thank you for understanding me without me having to say anything. And I don't know, I think this goes for all of you in the room. Dwight had to leave, but I'd like to maybe get you guys some sort of a prize, because this is a pain that is collective, and we understand each other without words. So I thank you so very much. I'm going to go to Mr. Woodard, and then after that, I'm going to go to Mr. Gooden. Let's flesh out a little bit, Mr. Woodard, what Brother Badu talked about. And he put up the book, the Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And yes, we put up the book and I haven't read it yet. It's not part of my library. Library will be added. And I'd like both Woodard and Gooden to talk about where you're at emotionally, because I'll be honest with you, as a husband, as a father, as an educator, as a global citizen, I have not watched the video. I have not watched the video. I can't watch the video. I'd like to know if you watched the video, what goes through your mind, because I'm already an asthmatic. Just hearing, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Just hearing that. So I don't even want to watch it. I didn't even want to go outside the house because I didn't even want to wear a mask. So what goes through your mind when you watch the video?
Well, thank you once again for having me. And to the brother's point about you showing your emotion, I think that's necessary, because I'll tell you why. We as Black men growing up, when we first cried as children, do you remember what you probably used to get told? stop crying or I'll give you a reason to cry.
Right, right. Or men
Now
don't
you're
cry.
from, exactly. You're from the islands. I'm from America, but yet that's synonymous with each other, right?
Right.
And what happens is we learn to suppress that. And now here we are. And I will be the first to acknowledge that I have failed my community, my people, in the sense of all these things you saw me post on Facebook, we never told our parents. We didn't tell them we got harassed by the cops as teenagers, got called the N-words at 13 by the cops. All because we have mastered, to our detriment though, holding in our emotions, because it was a sign of weakness. But like they said, it's a sign of strength. So I'll just let you know that never be afraid to show your emotions, because if not now, then when? Now, as far as the impact of the video, I've seen it 5-6 times. I implore you to, when you are strong enough to do it. And it was almost like the reminder, it was like a tattoo in my brain saying, don't forget this. This was another yet 9/11 for us Black men yet again. And what went through my emotions was, here we are again. Oh my God, we're going back, because I'm born and raised in Miami, but my father's from Mississippi, my mother's from Georgia. So the South is my heritage. And so I thought, wow, this is really scary. And let me explain why. Even the KKK, when they did what they did back then, they knew enough to know, let me cover my face so I don't be seen, so I don't get in trouble. This is right in your face. This is brazen. They knew they were being recorded. And so what?
Hands in the pocket. Hands in the pocket. Chilling.
Exactly.
Hands in the pocket, chilling.
And so broad daylight. And so when you get taught as a Black man to have that conversation that we've all had, this is what you do when the cops pull you over so that you don't, raise the stakes. This is how you dress. This is how you carry yourself. And so now when you know that, okay, he's on the ground, what? There's no resisting arrest. There's really, nothing else he could have done. And so when you see this brazen activity, and let's remember something, this also means that these police reports were not only falsified, but went unchecked. This means that other officers there did nothing else. And so what do they always tell us as citizens? If you see something, say something. Does that not apply to you as officers? You swore an oath to uphold the law, to protect and serve. And so when I see this video, all these things are going through my head, like this is systematic racism, which makes it worse in a lot of instances than my grandparents and parents went through, because you're in broad daylight. There were no cameras back in the day when this was going on with the lynchings and things like that. And so, yeah, when I see this and I say to myself, wow, man's begging for his life. He's calling out to his deceased mother, knowing he's going to die. That's a modern day lynching. And then, yes, there finally was one arrest. We're still waiting for others, possibly. But to have that mindset that either that I can get away with this, or it's already been instilled that I know what I can get away with. Coroner's office, the original one, said what? It wasn't because of the officer. So when you see systematic racism like that, and the thing that we're not really discussing just yet is the post-traumatic stress as a Black man that you face, like you said, if I get pulled over, should we really have to feel like this routine traffic stop may make my heart stop? But that's what went through my mind, because as you've seen in my post, I said, well, maybe I was lucky enough that even back then, they didn't fear me enough to actually shoot me. They pulled out the guns for a routine traffic stop. But luckily, maybe they respected themselves or my life enough not to go further than what they've done. But to me, this sets a bad precedence if this does not get handled correctly, that if this cop can get away with it in broad daylight, what is there left for everyone else? And so I implore you, when you get a chance, to check that video out. It is painful medicine. I almost look at that as the dentist's office. It's going to hurt like hell in the beginning for you, but in the end, it's going to be worth it. And so emotions all over the place though. And I just say to myself, we have to do better. Our goal as any generation is to do better and take the baton to the next level. And right now, I think this is our moment to do that. So I definitely implore you to look at that video when you can.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Eric, when you started off, when you introduced yourself, you were actually talking about policy, which is really an avenue to start talking about solutions. Talk to us about your feelings as well, and also talk to us as to what we do, because one of the things I see possibly forming, and I'm sure it's been done before, And I don't know where we are with it now. However, I do believe that it's necessary now and it's going to be necessary continuously. It's a safe space for Black men to come together and say, you know what, cry, yell, do what you need to do. Let's have a conversation with each other. Let me look after your family. Let you look after my family, because we cannot do this as an individual. So talk to us about where you're at psychologically, emotionally. And then this is probably the most important question of all, right? How do we fix this? What do we do to get out? Are we ever going to get out of this? Is this something that's perpetual? You know, am I going to have to consistently look at myself in the mirror and say to Ted Victor, you know what, you're beautiful, you're smart, you're positive, as opposed to the subliminal images given to us on a daily basis? I listen to NPR religiously, and NPR will casually say, oh, this was a dark time. This is a dark day. I'm dark. I'm dark. Am I a problem? Implicitly and so forth. So talk to us about where you're at psychologically, emotionally, and talk to us about some suggestions as to how we can get out of this. Eric.
Yes. So, I mean, after listening to Robert explain, you know, everybody's emotions, and I actually watched the video. I watched all the videos because there was multiple videos, and there were videos after the fact, like after he died, and then they put him into the ambulance, and that was, to be honest, that was the most horrific. Was after what they did to him after he was murdered was just. I mean, I was really sad. I mean, I had tears. I was really horrified to see that, and you know, psychologically, like sometimes I just have to turn off the TV, not tune out of social media, because I can't see just things coming out of just police brutality, all these cases coming out, and it just makes me more and more sad. And in terms of solutions, I feel like the solutions are going to have to start, like I said earlier, policy, and I think, you know, just implementing more oversight over these departments, and you know, whether it's body cameras, and I know some departments, you know, have body cameras, but I'm seeing in a lot of cases where the body cameras are turned off, like the incident in Louisville. Why was the body camera off? And I feel like, you know, it's a combination of body cameras, people filming helps as well. But I just think it needs to be more institutional policy too. Like, you know, the training, you know, more training, but also I think other cops need to step up as well. I feel like they need to, if they see a racist, they need to say something. And I think the body cameras, you know, I'm very passionate about that, because I feel like body cameras will help the situation to some extent. Because I do know, like, you can't change a racist's heart. You know, if a racist in the department, they're not gonna, you know, you can't change them. You know, they'll come out after the fact. But I feel like there needs to be something to do, you know, something handled in the departments. You know,
thank you. Thank you for that response again, Eric. Speaking of policy, let's go back to you, Commissioner Douglas. I want to know, do policies have teeth? I mean, we can write all the policies in the world, and if at the end of the day, we are all a product of our environment, we are all a product of our experiences. If at the end of the day, you hire the best person you think for the job, pass every single test, and you find out at the end of the day, this person is a person who has some sort of a bias against a segment of the population, you know, I'm not necessarily sure you can circumvent that, because people will put up their best foot when you're hiring them. And a separate question is, when it comes to policy, is I don't remember, we had this conversation, but does Sunrise have their own police department? And if they do, are body cameras part of the policies? You're unmute. Okay, go ahead.
I'll start with your last question first. Yes, in fact, we do have body camonitors. We have robust auditors.
You have your own police department, or you're sharing?
We have our own police department.
Okay.
Almost 200 men and women. We have our own. We have a body camera program. It's one of the first in the county, and we have improved on the technology over the years. In fact, the last iteration of the technology that I've seen is that it's able to track every single police officer wherever they are, you know, in the city. and you know, there's numerous other opportunities to even tap into their video feed and things of that nature. They're unable to edit their videos, and you know, various things that places controls on the police officers and their ability to manipulate any of that feed. You know, when it comes to policies, you know, like any other, like employing anyone else. I mean, you have people who can do a good interview, and the hiring police is a multi-step process. They go through an academy. They go through different departments would have had their own hiring processes, but certainly in our department, our police chief, who is the buck stops with him, interviews every single individual before they're hired. You know, there are other processes that take place at the lower level, but before the imprimatur is placed on that hiring, he interviews everyone, and that's for him an effort to gauge certain personality characteristics which you don't necessarily pick up on the resume, or how they performed in training and so on. But again, one of the important things is that, first of all, at the very top, you have to have people that have a policy of how they want their police department to treat their community. And we have been implementing, at least in Sunrise, a more robust community policing infrastructure. And that is a policy that we have invested in Sunrise. And it's not just lip service, but it's an investment in money, meaning we're paying overtime for the cops to go on bicycles and go ride around the community and hang out with kids in the parks and go to businesses and just familiarize it, instead of approaching in a car and, you know, dropping your window and showing up surreptitiously. We spread our cops out in the community. We have various events where they have more interaction with the community. But you know, when you hire a police chief, and in our case, until Margate recently did so, we were the only city that had a police chief as a charter officer. And what that means is that the police chief reports directly to the governing body. In most cities, a city manager, or if it's a strong mayor city, they'll report to a mayor. But in most cases, at least in Broward County, you have an unelected individual, which is the city manager, who hires and supervises and oversee a police chief. We have our police chief report directly to the governing body, and therefore there's more of an opportunity for you to impress upon your police chief what your values are and what your expectations are for how to police your community. And then you create those expectations, and then you demand accountability so that those expectations are met. And so not only do we have those policies that we're able to attempt at least to hire the quality people that we want based on our vision of policing. But I personally, for example, since I've been a commissioner, every time there's a new hire or several new hires, because usually they come in chunks of 5 or 6, 8, 10, I take the opportunity to go to their swearing-in ceremonies, and I take the podium and I address them, and I tell them what, as the people's representative, what my expectations are for how they're going to treat our community. Mm-hmm. And it may seem like a small thing, but you have to understand that if you catch them as they come in and you mold them into how you want them to be, if you came in and there's some bad apples in there, as you're continuing to refresh the pool, you're refreshing the pool, and that's a strategic 5, 10, 15-year program, but you are trying to make sure that those who are coming in through the door are a certain characteristic that will treat the community with respect, and that will follow the protocol as we have set them out, and it continues when they know they won't get away with certain things. My good man spoke about the fact that this individual sat there and stared right in the camera and did what he did, and it was a clear indication that he felt, who cares?
Right.
Nothing's going to happen. If he didn't, those things are coming out of the briefing rooms. Those things are coming out of the national conferences that these guys attend. These things are coming out of the academies. And so if they believe that they can get away with it, if they're being told on their morning briefings that they can get away with it, they're absolutely going to do it. But if the leadership sends the message down through the structure that this is not the kind of policing that's going to be tolerated, and it's you have to treat the community with respect and dignity, then it is going to flow down through the ranks. And it's not an overnight process. But they say if you put a water in a bucket, fresh water, and you put it down outside, and it sits there for months and months and months, and you don't stir it up, it's going to go, and get stale and become not so fresh anymore. And it's
A cesspool. Mm-hmm.
And so you have to continue to refresh that pool and get rid of the ones that don't share the values that you're trying to create. And even if you come in and it's a horrible department that is tearing down from all corners, there still has to be a refreshing process, because believe it or not, we do need the police. So the question is, since we need them and we have to have them, what kind of police are we going to cultivate? And really, it is about what you're cultivating, because it's a deliberate, you have to be deliberate in how you're framing and grooming and cultivating that department, and what values you're going to set for that department in terms of how they interact with your community.
I have someone here on social media responding. Mark Spence, he says, do they teach victims of abuse how not to agitate their abusers? Why should we teach our boys to accept abuse? I'm not necessarily sure anybody is going to promote the acceptance of abuse in any way, shape, or form. I do believe that since folks are rioting, since folks are protesting, I do believe that the sentiment of the country and all over the world is that enough is enough. I'm looking at the...
My good man, I have teenage boys. I have 13, I have 16, and I posted an incident this morning about an interaction my 16-year-old had with the police about 3 weeks ago in my own city, my own police department. And he was walking in his own community, 5:45 in the afternoon, walking to go to a friend's house, and somebody called the police, and they described him as about 18 years old, wearing XYZ, and that he's seemingly wandering and that he doesn't look like he belongs. Now, this is a community of 800 homes in which he has lived for the last 13 years, and most of them know him. And, within 5 minutes, there were 4 police cars surrounding him, separating him from the other kids he was with, questioning him about where he's from, what is he doing, asking for IDs, you name it. And as you can imagine, I wasn't happy about it. I listened to the 911 call, and I dug up the body cameras, and indeed, it was somebody who lives right there who called the police and said, oh, see this black kid who he's walking broad daylight, doing nothing furtive, and they called the police. And my son came home and related to me, and we had the conversation. And obviously, he was polite to the police. He answered their questions, and they determined his identity, and they went about their business. And when I juxtapose that with what happened in the park in New York, other things that I've seen around, you start to get the sense, and my son is very savvy, and he understood exactly what just took place, that he's been held to a different standard from white kids in the community who have gone and stolen things from off of people's patio and done various things that kids do, but have never really had the police been called on them. And he was just walking along the street. So I didn't teach him to accept abuse in that situation, but I had to have a conversation with him. which was just another level up from previous conversations I've had with him about the notion of the society in which he lives. And that it wasn't just police, but neighbors, friends, the people with whom we live and reside that are targeting us and each other. That they're the ones calling the police. The police didn't just show up. They're the ones who are creating fear in the community. And they're the ones who are giving my son the impression that he doesn't belong and somehow he's different from everybody else. Our own neighbors. And so I will never teach him to accept abuse. In fact, I always say to him, you know, there's a table and there are some people who are on the menu and some people who are sitting at the table eating. You're not going to be on anybody's menu.
That's right.
At the end of the day, I also have to make sure he comes home safe. And I have to teach him what tools he has to employ to come home safe. Because even as an adult myself, who is very savvy, trained, and experienced in the justice system, when I get approached by a police officer, I employ certain tools to make sure I come away from that without being thrown down on the ground and handcuffed. Because at the end of the day, there's a saying in the cop world, I may not be able to give you a rap, but I can certainly give you a ride. And so I don't want to be face down on the ground and be brought to booking and then maybe a month later, the state attorney null-pross the case or whatnot. I don't win anything by going around saying, man, I just hired my lawyer and I beat that charge. No, you just paid a lawyer. You just experienced the booking. You just experienced the stresses of it all. And at the end of the day.
But Commissioner, please pardon me for interrupting. You still have these thoughts as an elected official? Doesn't everybody know? Doesn't everybody know who you are?
Well, not everybody knows who I am, but besides that, it doesn't matter who you are. Please get that. And you've heard this anecdotally before. It doesn't matter how you dress and how you look. I mean, I've been in the courthouses of this county, dressed as an attorney, clearly looking like an attorney, and I walk in an elevator, and because a cop wants the exclusive use of the elevator to move a detainee, he speaks to me in a very degraded manner for me to.
Okay. So what's the point? What's the point of playing by the rules? What's the point of playing by the rules? What's the point of going to school and speaking like them and walking like them and looking like them? What's the point if they're going to still treat us this way? What's the point?
And before you answer that question, this is what we have to contend with as educators, because children are seeing that and saying, well, what's the point? What's the point in following rules if when we follow rules, we still don't get the consequences that these—
the benefits that we're supposed to get.
Benefits of following these rules. What's the point, right? And
well, I you know, I'm a lawyer and I'm a politician. Or a public servant, I should say. I don't claim to know all of the answers to how psychologically we should deal with all of these. I can tell you what I did. In a blink of a moment, I thought to myself, how dare you speak to me like that? And would you have spoken to somebody else in that manner? And all these things are going through your head in a split second. And maybe I should resist. Maybe I should tell you a few choice words and tell you not to speak to me like that. On the other hand, I also quickly thought that this is going to result in me being dragged by the arm, try to be forcefully removed. And the moment I flex, now what was a mere encounter becomes a resistant arrest.
Becomes a scene, becomes a scene.
And so you feel helpless because here I am, this person who defends people who have been charged with the most egregious of crimes, who can do well at it. And yet you're in a situation where you want to defend yourself. You want to say, how dare you speak to me like that? What would cause you to walk up to the elevator and command me to get out in the most derisive of manners just because you want exclusive use of the elevator. Go and, I could think of many choice words to say. But I instantly knew also that, maybe a few hours later after his bosses intervene and whatnot, but I would have still endured the inhumanity and the degradation of having a cop bring me to the floor, and in order to cover the unlawful use of force, trump up some charge. If you look at my Facebook page today, I went in detail about one of the very first cases I took to trial as a private criminal defense attorney 12 years ago. A black woman, was tasered by a white cop in the middle of her living room right here in Lauderdale. And the encounter was not of a criminal nature. There was no criminal investigation going on. In fact, he was at her home because ChildNet, another governmental agency, had sent the cops over there to do a welfare check because, again, the ChildNet individuals, another state agency, individuals were being disrespectful to this woman, treating her in a degrading manner. Again, and we feel that it had racial undertones, and she could not stand it anymore. And she said, I do not want you in my home. Please have them send somebody else to my home. So instead of sending another ChildNet representative, they sent the police. And they entered this woman's living room, demanded she sit in the corner like a child in timeout, and started to question her as to why she didn't want a ChildNet representative in her home. And she sought to get up from her chair in her own living room to say, I want you to listen to this voicemail that this lady left on my phone to hear why I didn't want it. And the moment she got up, she was tackled to the floor. She was crushed onto the top of a center table in her living room, and she was tasered right there. With a t-shirt and an underwear on, they dragged her outside to arrest her. And but for the fact that a black police sergeant showed up on the scene that day, they would have brought her to Broward County Jail in a t-shirt and a underwear. And they charged her for battery on a law enforcement officer. Now, anybody who knows anything about the justice system knows that when you're charged with battery on a Leo, that's a mandatory adjudication. You go to trial, you're going to prison for having battered a police officer. And this lady is an immigrant green card holder, so that was certain deportation for her. And she had to endure all of that physical violence against her. She had to take this case to trial. And believe me, anybody who has ever gone through a criminal trial, it's not a nice thing. It's not psychologically easy to sit there and watch a jury walk into that room about to issue a verdict in your case. And this cop came in that courtroom and told lies after lies after lies about why he did this to this lady. He said she attacked him. And he showed pictures of her arm with finger marks. The arm, Ted, had hair all over it. The cop sitting in front of me testifying was hairless. And when I questioned him about his hairless arm, I said, I see you shave your arms. He said, since he was in the academy, he shaved his arms because he may have to enter the water. And I was able to show the jury a picture of an arm filled with hair. So it just so happened that day this lady supposedly attacked him, he had hairy arms. In 14 minutes, the jury came back and said she was not guilty. But I'll tell you what was most significant about that. When he was done lying, he walked off the stand and he walked straight to the front door and walked out the courtroom. He didn't wait for that verdict. He didn't care. It doesn't matter. Yes, she was found not guilty. She was relieved. But she won nothing. Because 2 years later, she was calling me to tell me she's still feeling the residual effects of being tasered. She had cramps down her legs. She paid me money, and she had to endure 1 year of it. And for those who may wonder, it's State v. Mathis. It's a court case here in Broward County. It's easy to find those things because you can look up the lawyer's name and look at all cases he has handled. It is a fact that Black people are abused in this community and any interaction with the police. This is why it's so scary when it comes to my son or any other member of the community. It doesn't have to be a criminal investigation. It could be the most benign contact with the police that turns into something else. And so, yes, there is a good question. What do I do? I've done right. I've paid taxes. I've contributed to society. I've done all they say that I should do. Why am I being treated different? I don't have all the answers, but I try to do the best I can to lend my voice to a better place.
Counteract that. Like, because these are the issues why we have an Eric Gardner and we have, and we have a George Floyd. And let me just ask a quick question. And I'm sorry, Robert, I know you want to ask a question. Let me just ask a quick one. And so my question is, how do you, in that policy, and yes, we have a lot of cases where they're on video, right? And those are the cases that we may think it's easy to prosecute, but then a lot of times they still get off. But then you have those cases where there is no video. It's the police's word against.
The majority of them, we're here because of the technology. We probably just see the tip of the iceberg.
There's no video. It's just word against someone's word against another.
And I'll just respond theoretically, because it's really hard to get into specific policies at this time. But when you look at the maneuver that was used on the good man that caused his death, the kneeling in the neck, it was an allowed policy in
Minneapolis. And it's part of the training. It's part of the training.
Tools that they're able to.
It's in there. It's in the policy in Minneapolis to put the knees on the neck. It's in the policy.
You already can see where the defense is going when you hear the union say we're going to have to, don't judge our officers, we are going to have to revisit training policies, etc. Basically, they're allowed to use that tool. And so the question now is, did he unreasonably employ a tool that was given to him? The way you can make policy such as what we have, you cannot do that. So you have use of force policy, you have arrest policies, you name it. And different departments can choose to determine what tools they want to give their officers, where you can objectively say, hey, you kneeled on somebody's neck, whether it's for 10 seconds or 10 minutes, period, it's not allowed. It's not allowed for you to strike somebody in certain parts of their body. It's not allowed for you to use certain force for certain things. You cannot shoot a person who is fleeing after having committed a retail theft. You can only employ deadly force where there is objectively a need for deadly force. So you can basically write certain objective policies where nobody can come over there and tell you that he saw somebody, you got a call to the mall, that somebody had stolen something and ran, and he saw the fleeing felon, and because the crime amounts to a felony, then because in some instances the policies say if the person is a fleeing felon, you can use deadly force. In other instances, it may say unless they're a violent felon, you can't use deadly force. So you can really shape policies that may constrain their ability to use certain types of force on the community.
Well, thank you, Robert. You wanted to have some input on this?
Absolutely, because this definitely hits close to home, being profiled a good portion of my teenage life.
By the way, just give us some background. You have a family, you have children. How old are you, and what do you do again?
I'm actually 42, and I have a 5-month-old daughter now.
Oh,
so
congratulations.
Thank you. So this is definitely hitting close to home. So, for example, I heard you guys, the teachers, say, what do you tell your students? And I heard on social media, why should they be the ones that have to teach the individuals how to de-escalate a situation? And I am here to tell you that it works. It may not always work, but I think that if we do not, we have failed our children, we failed our loved ones, we failed our community if we don't have those conversations. And point being is this, for you teachers, if I can de-escalate a situation, if I know how, if I've been taught the tools on how to, it may not still work in my favor. That's very true. It may still go very badly for me or anyone else I know. But if I can try that and reduce that to 50%, I gave myself a 50% fighting chance. It is no different than what you tell your students on a test. If you can eliminate two out of those 4 questions, you have a 50% chance to succeed. It is no different in the real world. So I am a huge advocate of understanding that, yes, it's unfortunate that we have to even learn and have these conversations about how to de-escalate a situation is beyond necessary. It can also be life-saving. I am a true testament to that. I've been pulled over unjustly at least 8 or 9 times in my life, being from Miami, to the point where I've gotten pulled over, not even because I was in a nice car, a 99 Jeep Cherokee, clean cut. But my point is this: yes, it's aggravating when they sometimes come at you. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? To agitate the situation. However, if I were to escalate the situation, what good is that going to? There's no good that can come of that either. And so I implore people to learn how to de-escalate the situation. I also implore us to learn the laws. Example, at what point, if you get pulled over for a routine traffic stop, does an officer feel necessary to draw his weapon at you and unremove the safety? These are the conversations that we need to have, because at some point, is he coming up to your car directly with his gun pointed at you, or is he not? And so how do you respond to that? If you have a concealed weapon in your car, what is the protocol? So if we're not teaching ourselves or our kids when they start to drive these laws, then we fail them. If we know the protocol is to, officer, wait a minute, shouldn't I be stepping outside if I told you I had a concealed weapon in my glove compartment? Officer, is there a certain reason why you're pointing your gun at me for a routine traffic stop? These are the kind of conversations that we have to have, because if we don't, we're setting them up for failure. And like I said, it can still end very violently, of course, but why not give anyone a fighting chance, or a 50% chance at that, to make sure that they can, like I said, everyone can come home. So I'm a huge advocate for equipping us with this information. And one last point is to touch on earlier, what can we do about laws and things like that? I think that as a community, we need quarterly town halls. We need to be able to pull records and get records publicized about
who is policing us,
who's policing us, and how the crime rate is. And again, I think that it's also incumbent upon us to also look at neighboring police communities and say, hey, why is their crime rate lower than ours in a minority community? And take the ideas. Don't be afraid to share it. Don't be afraid to, if you get tickets and you feel like the situation was not handled correctly, to file a complaint. But I also, on the other side of that coin, say this: if you know you, for example, were speeding, officer is very polite, and he gave you a ticket, and that was the end of that, give him a compliment. Give the police department a compliment. I was wrong. He gave me a ticket. I didn't fear for my life. He didn't threaten me. He didn't abuse me. Don't be afraid on the other side of that coin to say, you know what, he did his job.
Positive reinforcement.
Positive reinforcement as well as the negative. Too many times, like I said, and I'm guilty of this as well, too many times I've harassed, I've never filed a complaint. So that's 7 officers that may still be on the street right now. So this is my point. I've had officers just come by when we were playing basketball in Miami Gardens. Hey guys, how you guys doing? That's a compliment. And so I felt on both ends of the spectrum. But nonetheless, this is why we're having these conversations.
Well, I'm a little bit nervous because our friends Asa, Dwight, and Eric had to go because there's just so much more to talk. And I'm looking at the time, and I want to consider your times, because another component of this conversation is and this may be more so for Commissioner Douglas, but it's really for all of us, the cops and community relations, right? Because my guess is that if they know us, they're less likely to treat us in a particular way, right? So at a later date, and I'm going to give you guys homework because I'm a teacher. Number one, I'm going to ask you brothers to stay alive, please, please. I'm saying this kind of jokingly, but I really am not joking, because at the end of the day, we are all George Floyd. We are all Rodney Kings at any moment, at any time. So stay alive. And number two, we have the added responsibility of all of the things, the fighting of the history, the fighting of the negativity, the psychological, the cultural setbacks and so forth. We have the added responsibility of asking our counterparts, our allies, to also take this responsibility on as well. So as we are approaching, believe it or not, an hour and 45 minutes, I'm going to ask you guys to give me a vision, because words have strength, vision have strength, a vision of what America should look like, right? What should we work for? And I say this, and to be brutally honest, I don't know if we're ever going to see it, because every time it happens, we're hoping it's the last time. Every time it happens, I'm saying, my God, this cannot be another not Rodney King in 2020. This is back to back. We have Aubrey, we have the young lady, we have Floyd. Is back to back. In addition to COVID-19, I've lost 4 family members and possibly another one on the way because a cousin of mine told me that my cousin's in the hospital. We have hurricane season coming on. It's just too much. It's just too much. So I'm going to ask you guys to think about your closing statement, but then to come back the 2nd of July, come back, call me, stay in touch. I want to be your sounding board for venting, because without words, you understand me. You understand where I'm at and so forth. So go ahead, Brother Badeau, give us some closing thoughts and anything you'd like to share with us, because you were the first person on this platform to give me the permission to be vulnerable. So thank you.
Welcome. And I just want to clarify, it's not that as educators, we don't know what to say. It's more so we want to empower our kids in a way that actually benefits them given the climate that they're living in, right? We definitely want them to be safe. We definitely want them to be empowered. We definitely want them to use their voice. We definitely want them to learn their worth, their value, and to know that they have purpose and know that they have a place in the country that they were born in. And they are citizens of this country, and they have a right to everything that is afforded to them in the Constitution. So I'm just going to speak from the educator's perspective and how I would like to see a world with young people who, in spite of what's going on around them, they can learn how to deal in solution-based thinking. They can learn how to forgive. They can learn how to have conversation and communicate, even when it's difficult, even when we can't understand what's going on. We can still reach out to each other and say, hey, this is a problem. We need to solve it. We need to do what we need to do to change what needs to change. And having the courage and the ability to lead that change. That's the type of world I want to see for our young kids. And I believe that they are the ones that will lead us into that world. So it becomes that much more important for us as parents, as leaders, as mentors, as teachers, to empower them, to make them feel that they are somebody in spite of what's going on around them, and to teach them to not seek affirmation from our oppressors, because if they do, they're going to sure question who they are. So that's basically what I would like our world to look like from the perspective of an up and coming young person trying to find their way in this world.
Thank you so very much for sharing that. Commissioner Douglas, some closing remarks. Somebody just asked a question as to how often policies are reviewed. And I don't know if you want to tackle that because this is what, yeah, how often are policies reviewed? Because if, for example, the policy in Minneapolis is to restrain someone, to include the possibility of restraining someone by putting the knee on the neck. Obviously, we see that's not a good idea, because once they're handcuffed, I don't really see the need for that logically. So I don't know how often policies are reviewed to figure out whether or not they're a good idea when it looks good on paper, but in application in the community, it's not a good idea.
Well, I'll say this much about policy making. You make policies that you expect to be somewhat timeless. You know, policies are not things you go, you'll change your operations, in a more dynamic way, but policy making, you try to create policies that are timeless. And so it's not something you go and you tweak every day. With that said, obviously with situations like these, it's always important that you go back and you revisit and look to make sure that, the policies as they're written are suitable for the needs of our community and to make sure there's nothing lingering there, that could be problematic. But, you know, we as policymakers at the very top of the organization, we don't get involved in the day-to-day operational aspects of our police force. We create broad frameworks in which we expect our police to operate, and then, you know, we expect. Well, when I look, for example, at our use of force policy, it originally came into effect from the early 1980s. And, you know, there's been modifications to it, but it's just to indicate that these are things that you hope will be more timeless and not something that requires every day. To the broader question about, you know, what I see, and I want to add that I agree with my colleague that just spoke about the children and the next generation of the children, because they're becoming more savvy, more dynamic in terms of their interaction. And quite frankly, we have made some progress. There is no doubt that the generation of the 1950s and the 60s, 70s, and even the 80s is not the same as they are today. The young kids that I see in school are, you know, more open to discussion about, you know, racial integration and all that. Because, you know, as others have said, you know, in the past, children are not born with hatred in them.
Blank slate, blank slate. They're born with a blank slate. The environment shapes them.
And so you find that the kids that my kids are growing up with, they're less likely to hold animus if their parents are not teaching them animus. And there has been some progress between the time when we had anti-miscegenation laws to now. We clearly have had more people of different races coming together and finding common ground and so on. And so I spoke earlier about refreshing the pool, or refreshing the water. And as you continue to refresh and people are coming together more, and you find that people are having different racial groups being part of their family, and they start to find more common ground because they're now interacting, then we're going to have to be able to find more commonalities among us as human beings. I can tell you, in my early years of living in this country and traveling throughout the United States, and the job I had required that I go to places that I would not have bought a plane ticket and gone. It's just that I had a job to do, and I was sent there. And I've encountered or gone to many communities where I am probably, outside of seeing a Black person on TV, they've never seen a Black person. And I was a fascination to them. And they had certain views about me and or my kind, and it was largely based on ignorance, having not had any ability to interact with somebody like myself. Or they will tell you in a fascinated way that they had a Black friend in the military or something, but that's their only interaction except what is portrayed on TV. And so I have found that in my interaction with these individuals, maybe it was just for a week because I was in their business working, I was able to dispel and educate. And I found it to be a great pleasure for me to do that, because I felt I was changing somebody's mindset who may change the mindset of their children. And it may be hopeful for society in general. But I think it's important that as we all come together and start to share the same space, that
Right. If I might add, we have to do that both outside and inside our culture, because I've met brothers who say to me, well, why do you speak this way? Why is it that you don't speak what I've seen in my neighborhood? You know, are you gay? Are you adopted by white people? Like, you speak like a white person. So we have to do that both in and outside of the culture.
That could trigger another discussion, because, you know, I answered a question recently. I was at a conference where there were 2,000 political representatives, and one of the games we played was, there was a room full of about 500, and they say, do you believe racial disparity can end? And they said, if you believe strongly, go to the right. If If you don't believe, go to the left. And if you're somewhat neutral, and I went to I don't believe racial disparity will ever end. And, of course, it can be a controversial position to take. But I pointed out that racial disparity is not just a black and white issue. First of all, let's make it clear, 85% of the black slaves brought across the Atlantic went to South America, to Brazil. Racial disparity is not just a black and white thing, because I pointed out, if you go to Europe, you'll find that the gypsies are treated a little different based on shade.
Yes, in Turkey, yes, Turkey.
And Chinese, which is the majority, and then you have the Uyghurs and the others, and they're treated with disparity based on race. In Europe, they're treated with disparity based on race. And you and I may look at that gypsy person and say, well, he looks just like that guy. Look at the Italians' experience in New York. The Italians who came to America early didn't feel quite Anglo-Saxon. They felt they had a struggle because they were a little bit more olive, and that was, they were treated differently based on some racial disparity. And then I finally stopped with, I grew up in Jamaica, a Caribbean country where there was lighter shades and dark people. And you find that the lighter shade people tended to end up with certain jobs and in certain, and certain opportunities were given to them. And they held on to this notion of race. So it's not just a straight black and white thing. In fact, I say it's an economics thing.
Right. I've been saying that it's not black or white, it's green.
Absolutely, because again, if you go to India, they have a caste system.
Exactly.
I may look at all the Indians and say they look alike. They have about 12 different castes. You're a toilet cleaner, or you're a bureaucrat, or you're civil servant, or you're this, or you're that. But they stratify societies. They use race for that stratification, but in effect, it's a way to share the pie unequally. By saying if you're of that class or that race or that group, you get this much. And if you're from another group, you get this much. And if you're this group, you get to eat more than your stomach can hold. It all boils down to economics.
So are you saying that, which I'm not liking the picture that you're painting, because are you saying that if we were all one color, if we were all yellow people, if we were all green people, if we were all blue people, in human nature, it is our nature to stratify, to socially stratify. Okay, so here's the question for you all. Okay, I'll accept that because I'm an anthropologist, I'm a sociologist, I'm an educator. Do we have to treat the people at the bottom like George Floyd, though? Do we have to do that? Do we have to do that?
I'll say this much. I'll use one more example before I get to that exact question. The child labor laws in this country. We had a significant problem in this country with child labor at the turn of the century. These were not black children. They were worked in factories in New York. It was unsafe. There used to be fires, you name it. It was based on economics. It was poor whites. And they attempted constitutional reform in this country to get rid of child labor, and they couldn't, because those who made money on their labor would not allow it to happen. We happen to have passed the Fair Labor Standards Act at the turn of, during the Great Depression of the 1930s, which was really about overtime payments and minimum wage, but they were able to apply it to child labor, and the courts upheld it. And that's the only way they could have gotten rid of child labor. But as long as there's a dollar to be made on somebody else's back, we will create artificial stratification to justify that. Now, with that said, you remember how we stratified the plantation? We would have the master who was absentee. He was in England. He counted the money. And then he would send a poor white guy to be the overseer with the whip.
Right.
And he exacted the most brutal punishment on those who don't do work as he wants. He was not the end beneficiary of it. So you ask me, do you have to treat people that way? And I say to you, those who are treating people that way are just the overseers cracking the whip.
I hear you. Hold on. Then I'm going to take that opportunity to give Brother Badeau an opportunity to do some closing statements because he has to sign off.
And hold up, I gave my closing statement. Remember, this whole thing was a closing statement.
Well, I want to give you the opportunity to say goodbye, and I want to thank you for your words, for your presence. I admire you and respect you more than you know, brother. Thank you so very much.
No problem, no problem. And I thank you for inviting me as part of this panel. I do have to run because I have a 7 o'clock thing to do. So, but we'll definitely keep this conversation going. It's great being able to speak with Mark and Robert. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
God bless, brother. God bless, brother.
Yes.
All right. So, Robert, I saw you shaking your head. I know you had a lot to say. So thank you. And we're going to try to close soon because I tell people it's about an hour, it's about 90 minutes, but then the topics are so heavy, it winds up expanding. And I'm not going to tell Commissioner, look, you stop speaking because I want to hear what he has to say. So what do you have to say, Robert, before we close?
Just thank you for giving all of us a format to express ourselves, ideas, thoughts, fears for that matter. And hopefully we have struck some nerves. We have opened some, ears and hearts and minds. What do I envision? I kind of find myself these days looking backwards in the sense of if you don't know where you came from, you don't know where you're going. And what I mean by that is that we have to remember as a country that we're still relatively new compared to other countries. And that's not to minimize what we're going through, because if you think about what slavery and the Civil War was really about, what was it really about? It was about the South getting free labor and the North not having it. It wasn't necessarily about us being free. Mm-hmm. And I bring that up is because, as we all have stated, economics, it plays a major part in everything that we do. If you look at certain inner cities, look if they get fresh fruits and veggies, that contributes to their overall health. And so why I bring up economics is because economics also carries weight. I think our community, we have done poorly in, I think, glorifying the every 4 years just vote for the president as if politics are not local. To me, politics and crime, they're all local. And so when we only, I guess, urge us to vote every 4 years and wonder why things don't change in our states, cities, and communities, that's why. Another example, the perfect example to me was Ferguson. After Mike Brown was killed, the officer had his day in court. And the first thing I used to hear people say was, well, how come there's not enough Black people on the jury? People don't realize if you do not vote, you do not get called for jury duty. And those are the things that we need to have conversations about, because that's another fail-safe. I understand the outrage if a cop never makes it to court. That's a different animal in itself. That's when we have to attack the laws and the people who make them. But if it goes to court and we still aren't representing ourselves in our communities because we have not voted, we cannot get called for jury duty. That's on us. And so I like the fact that we are in the social media world where we are now glued to our televisions, our cell phones. So we have the means now to push those agendas. Your local election is coming up this time. You don't like these laws, vote these people out. And so, as people have stated earlier, the protest is to make aware of a law you don't like. What are you going to do about it? And so this is why I'm hopeful, because we now have the attention again for the world, maybe for the wrong reasons, but also for the right ones. Can you tell me a time in your life where you saw so many nationalities for our agenda? I can't. I can't.
Right.
And that's why I'm hopeful. That's why I'm hopeful.
That's the silver lining in the crisis. Yep.
And we have to strike while the iron is hot.
Absolutely. All right. So, gentlemen, it's 7 o'clock. I do not want to end, but I have to respect your time, and I'm going to ask you guys to come back. Some closing remarks, Commissioner Douglas?
Well, Fred, I want to thank you, of course, Ted, for using, I know it takes a lot of time. I've seen you generating a lot of opportunities for people to bring different messages to the community from different realms. And I want to thank you for investing this time that you have invested in using the Broward social network to create a platform for us to message through. And, I would just like to say to the Black community, to the local Broward County community, Black and white, to our nation, if somebody is anywhere else in this country, that, hey, it's cliche, but we all bleed red. We all have the same desires for our children and for our own lives, and
Absolutely.
or I should say similar. It may not be the same, but similar. We have similar desires, needs, and if we can just find a way to listen to each other, maybe we can start to begin to understand each other's perspectives. Because right now, I don't think we have done enough listening to each other.
Right.
And so I urge you to talk to somebody who you would not have otherwise spoken to. Gain their perspective. If you see them at the bar, strike up a conversation. If you see them at the park, waiting for their kids to be done playing a game, start a conversation. Because you might learn something and you might start to see a different perspective, and you might find that you have way more in common than you could ever imagine.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I can only urge us to continue to walk that walk and talk that talk. And I am also, like my good brother, heartened by the response that I've seen from a cross-section of this country and a cross-section of the international community, because I'm hopeful that we have tugged at the hearts and the consciences of those who can make a difference. Because if you recall, when we fought slavery, it was Baptist abolitionists, like the people in the William Wilberforces and those that were able to help us move the dial.
Part of the movement. They were part of the movement. They were part of the movement towards liberation.
The civil rights movement had a significant number of whites and various other groups participated in it. So this is not an anti-white dialogue. It's a let's come together dialogue.
Right. Absolutely.
So hopefully we can continue this conversation.
I cannot. There are no words to thank you all, considering the circumstances. Since this is on social media and there are some people who are watching this, again, my name is Ted Victor. I'm the founder of the Broward Social Network. My message to everyone listening within the reach of this broadcast is that as children of God, we really do not have that many differences. We may look different. However, our needs as spiritual beings, as people, as organisms who are breathing and drinking the same water, breathing the same air, walking on the same land, we have the same needs for respect and safety and love and shelter and nutrition and survival, just as anybody else. So whatever policies are in place which would permit a police officer to put their knee on an individual's neck in order to restrain them must be absolutely revised and should not be in any way, shape, or form, because breaking a law does not mean that you ought to end their life. This is why we have jails, this is why we have laws and so forth. So I'm hoping that this conversation will continue. I'm hoping that we are going to find a way to kind of reset the tone in this country and make sure that everybody is under the understanding that I am responsible for your safety just as much as you are responsible for mine. There's just no way that I could be calling on Black people to look after my safety. Everybody should be part of this process. I'm responsible for your safety and vice versa. This must stop. This class of less than, this class that of lack of equity must stop. And I guess we'll have to keep on talking until we get there. And some people are going to do that violently, unfortunately. If we don't feel like as if we're being heard, then we're actually going to respond in ways to make sure that we are heard, okay? And we don't want to necessarily have to go there. So again, Dwight Bullard, Eric Gooden, Aisha Saw, Mark Douglas, Horace Badeau, Robert Woodard, and everyone who participated in this platform psychologically, at a distance remotely. I thank you with everything that I have. I thank you with everything that I have. I am praying for you to be safe. I'm hoping that there will never be another George Floyd. And I will say, I am George Floyd. I am George Floyd. And I'm hoping to not end up like him. I have a family that I love. I have a community that I love. And there are gifts that the universe has given us in order to be able to make the world a better place. We all have a purpose. So thank you very much for your time. Let's get this information out. And God bless you all and your families. And I really, truly respect and appreciate all of you and look forward to doing this again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Woodard. Thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioner Douglas. Thank you. Good night. Good night.